Hey, welcome back to Business 150, Introduction to Management. We are deep into our look at the topic of decision making here in module number 7. And in this particular video, what we're looking at is a topic that the textbook introduces called Decision-Making Styles. And so you can see here, Lecture 7.5, Decision-Making Styles. And really, what this senses tries to acknowledge is the sense that we are individuals with a history and a background, and therefore when we are put into a decision-making role in an organization, we already have a habitual style of how we typically make decisions that we now bring into the workplace, right? So rather than relying primarily upon perhaps a learned, taught system of making decisions, when we're typically thrust into a managerial role, we use the style that has worked for us in the past, that has been built up over years of experience and habits, the way we've normally made personal decisions, and we bring that to bear on how we approach organizational decisions. Now, that's not necessarily wrong or suboptimal, but we should acknowledge we have different individual decision-making styles, and in understanding those styles, we'll do a better job of really understanding where are these kinds of things working for us and ending up in great decisions, and where might we be able to improve, knowing that the reason we use these styles is because of habit and past history, not necessarily because they're optimal in this particular role. So, we hope that when we finish this video, that you'll be able to discuss these 4 primary decision-making styles and how they impact us in our managerial lives. Climbing straight into it then, here are the 4 managerial styles, decision-making styles: directive, analytical, conceptual, and behavioral. So, one at a time. Managers with a directive style dislike ambiguity and desire power. These leaders base their decisions on facts and are focused on results. Just the facts, ma'am, and we got to be serious about accomplishing results. That's the directive style of decision making. Number 2, managers with an analytical style can tolerate a greater degree of ambiguity, and they like to tackle new challenges. They like to use logic and problem solving. And so you may be the type of person right now watching this video who you tend to be the type of person who loves developing new models for analytical purposes, that you love to tackle new challenges and perhaps find novel and new and creative ways of solving particular problems. That's an analytical style. Managers with a conceptual style, number 3, are skilled at developing new solutions and relying upon intuition. Managers with a conceptual style, they like to think of themselves as big picture people. I'm trying to keep in mind the big picture, and therefore my gut tells me, and I have a novel way of approaching this, and this is a creative way of doing it. I just tend to think in terms of the great big concepts. That's a way of approaching decisions. Then finally, number 4, the behavioral decision makers focus more on the individual. They tend to be supportive of and empathetic to their followers. And so how will this impact my people? How will this impact my troop? How will they feel about it? And really, I want to make sure that they are feeling optimally satisfied and engaged and satisfied with their job, and how will this impact them? And that's another style of decision making. And so you can see that these styles of decision making sometimes are just simply rooted in who we are as people, our personalities, and the kinds of things we emphasize in our larger, wider lives, right? And yet at the same time, as these styles come to bear upon making managerial decisions, I think you can see immediately, just as I've been describing these 4 decision-making styles, how each of these styles may reach significantly different decisions about the same business challenge, right? A directive style may have a particular way of dealing with a drop in overall performance. Managers with an analytical style may have a whole different way of looking at the problem. Managers with a conceptual style may go with their gut on really what they think is the best way to tackle this. And then, of course, the behavioral decision makers may focus on the troops who aren't performing. What is it that we're not doing for them that we could do better? Now, I'm not here to tell you that any one of these 4 decision-making styles is the best style to bring with you, right? I'm simply making the observation we all have a particular personal style, and at nothing less, we should be aware of both the strengths and the weaknesses of each of these styles, right? What are some of the weaknesses of each of these styles? You can see the strengths, obviously, right? But the weaknesses, well, the weakness of the directive style may be that decision maker tends not to think about the impact upon the employees, upon the troops, upon the followers, right? Unlike the behavioral decision maker, who's all about that and may tend to lose sight of organizational goals from time to time. Whereas managers with an analytical style may move a little too slowly, right? They may want to do enough analysis and dig up enough information and are unwilling to make a decision until they have what they believe to be a sufficient amount of evidence. And so decisions may go slower with them as they see it as a new problem-solving challenge to be tackled. Whereas managers with a conceptual style may sometimes make the decision too quickly without enough information, instead relying more upon their gut than from time to time they perhaps ought to, right? So you can see there are both strengths and weaknesses to each of these styles. Now, what are some of the factors that affect all 4 of these personal decision styles? You can see them right here. Intuition, emotion and stress, and framing. Now, we've already talked about intuition in a previous lecture. You can see the description there, and you'll find it in the text. I don't want to belabor the point there. But let's talk about emotion and stress. Emotion and stress, feelings that can derail rational decision making and result in counterproductive or non-productive behavior. Now, here's the thing. If you are managing in an organization, you will have stress. You will have pressure. How that affects your decision making, well, that is, some of it's bound up in who we are as people, in our ability to deal with stress, and some of it has to do with the amount of stress that we're dealing with, right? However, emotion and stress will affect our decision making, and quite frankly, will probably affect those 4 decision making styles in different ways. Some things to consider. In addition, another thing that will affect our decision making, no matter what our decision making style is our personal framing. What does framing mean? Framing refers to how the information is phrased, presented, or labeled, and serves to bias judgment or interpretation of information. In other words, what is the pre-existing assumptions we make about the problem we're solving? Let me give you an example of framing. This is an easy example from marketing. Okay, so would you rather buy ice cream that is 20% saturated fat, or would you rather buy ice cream that's 80% fat-free? I'm really talking about the same carton of ice cream, right? You know that I am. But depending on how I frame the solution will determine how attractive it is to you. Another way to think about framing is 2 salesmen go off to an emerging economy on the African continent, and they both come back. They're both shoe salesmen, right? They go off from Britain to some country to try to ascertain what the opportunities are to sell shoes in this emerging economy. They both come back home and they talk to their boss, and the first one says, man, it's just, there's no market for us. Nobody there wears shoes. The second salesperson comes back and says to the same boss, this is a wonderful opportunity. There's hundreds of millions of people there and none of them yet have shoes. Right? Again, how one frames the problem, how one frames the situation, how one frames the challenge will in great ways determine how we make our decisions about the challenge. And so these are the kinds of things that this next slide attempts to describe for us, that no matter what our decision-making styles are, that these kinds of things like intuition and framing, the level of emotion and stress, our confidence and risk propensity, how much we tend to invest in an escalation of commitment despite the results, these are all going to play into our decision-making given the fact that we may already have a personal decision-making style, whether that's a directive style, a behavioral style, a conceptual style, or an analytical style. These are, in fact, of course, complicated things, right? When you take all of these elements together as the context within which a person will seek to evaluate the options and make a decision under the constraints of time, pressure, budget, and stress in an actual organizational business setting. And these are tough things. Difficult to predict where you're going to end up, but you should be mindful of the fact you have your own habits, you have your own style, and that will play into how you make decisions. Will the decisions you make be optimal, or will they be suboptimal because they are too influenced by one of these other external peripheral factors? Well, we hope that this has been some help for you to be able to understand the 4 decision-making styles the textbook talks about. More, of course, about this in the textbook, and we hope that this will be helpful in your study on the topic. We continue on with one more video in this module. We'll see you in that next video.